SMT Nation, thank you for tuning into this edition of the channel. There's a couple things I want to discuss in this video, and I want to share with you guys my experience with the T-Mobile network when, uh, well, I should probably frame this as this could be happening to you. It is definitely happening to me in my market. So, as these types of things might be happening and you're testing and you're wondering why is the network performing a certain way and all these things and why is there so much variation from site to site, I think you'll have some answers here in this video. All right, first of all, this testing was taken at 6:49 a.m. this morning, which is Sunday morning, June 5th, 2022. Okay. And the reason I frame that way is because it's early in the morning with very little traffic on the network. Most people just getting up or possibly still sleeping. This site is not congested whatsoever. This site is probably, I don't know, just over a half a mile away from where I'm testing from. And it's not that great. All right. I think we're probably connected. If it's anything like it used to be, we're probably connected to 10 megahertz of band 25, which, if that doesn't sound familiar, it's probably because you've always had T-Mobile and you never had Sprint. But if you're on T-Mobile now and you're connected to an old Sprint site, which has not been decommissioned or has yet to be upgraded as a Sprint keep site, is what they call it internally, this is the type of performance you're going to get on 10 megahertz of band 25, which is the same thing as band 2, right? It's just a different block of spectrum, different licensing, right? So slightly different frequency, just slightly. It's very, very close. But this is the performance I get from just around a half a mile or something, getting 30 down and 7 megs up. In and of itself, there's actually nothing wrong with that. It's not high capacity. There's not much spectrum on that connection. It's not aggregating with any other bands. You'll see the ping time is at 53 millisecond, which is not that great. That's not very good at all, actually. I mean, it's not horrible. I mean, for mobile usage, it's not the worst. The jitter is at 10 milliseconds, so it does have a little bit of jitter to it, a little jittery. But anyways, this is Sprint. This is an old Sprint site that has not been upgraded, really hasn't received any type of new gear, probably no adjustments to any type of radios or antennas. This has been probably a site that was upgraded 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. I have no idea. I really don't. It's possible it was updated maybe in 2017 or 18, but that's a long time to not get an upgrade on a site that used to carry a lot of traffic for them. Now, there's a neighboring cell that does carry more of the traffic within the area, but that cell doesn't reach, and that's the problem. Notice this is not connecting to 5G, it's only connecting to LTE. T-Mobile is going to tell you that they want to be a 5G based network, right? All things 5G, but this site is getting no love. And if they were to shut down this site, well, then I'd be getting probably 5 megahertz of band 71 or possibly connecting to 15 megahertz of N71, but it would probably be at an RSRP of like minus 125 or minus 130 because T-Mobile doesn't have the densest tower grid here. This is a site that needs to be kept and needs to be upgraded. So I want to show you guys how this connection manifests itself as a problem. Okay, so here is a fast.com speed test. This is on the Netflix servers, so this is like what type of performance you would get on T-Mobile if you're watching a video. All right, so I'm on a Magenta MAX plan. It's Magenta Business. Shout out to Los Mobile on the Magenta. 24 megabits on the downlink. You got 56 millisecond on the latency and then 16 meg uplink. I'm not sure why the variation between ookla and fast.com, but there you have it. And then here is the video test on ookla. You will see that it will let me have 1440p, which is quad HD. No buffering. The load time is 1,203 milliseconds. So I really don't see a problem with this. It's not that big of a deal. Now, there are some network elements and connections here that could become problematic. Say you were trying to do 4K, that probably wouldn't work. It'd probably buffer. Who knows? Maybe the 1440p, because of the jitter, might buffer as well. Who knows? But you could definitely do 1080p without any issue. Anyways, I'm not really here to nickel and dime those results. What I want to take a look at is putting it under a bit of a stress test with some variability with the NPerf app. What you can do with the NPerf app is it'll run it through multiple resolution video playback tests. So it'll do 360p, 720p, and 1080p. So in my opinion, On a smartphone, 1080p is plenty. If your display is maybe Quad HD or 4K, it's nice to be able to get that. But remember, you got to have like Magenta MAX. You got to have ultra wideband on Verizon. You got to have, the AT&T, higher tier plans and stuff like that. Either that or you're going to have to run a VPN, right, to bypass the traffic restriction on video. But you'll see 360p got a 94% rating. That's good. 720p, you got a 90% rating. Those are good. And I think even at the 1080p level, it was getting like 90 plus percent. So I don't have any issues or trouble with any of that. Now, this is where things get kind of touchy. The browsing test for just a simple google.com, the percentage rating was at 76%. That's not great. I mean, it's okay, but it's acceptable, I suppose. Load time of 2.3 seconds. Facebook 1.7, that came in at almost 83%, so that's a little better. Amazon.com took 2.5 seconds to load, 75%. That's not great. There's probably more images on that, which explains probably why it's, had trouble compared to Facebook. And then next, and this is where the real issue is, if you look at the Zoom rating, it took 8 seconds to connect and launch Zoom, and it rated it a 17.75%. That is horrible. That's a really bad score. Don't get me wrong. This is the hard part of this test. The Zoom meetings, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the app, the developers, however they've got the coding, it's a nightmare to try to connect and hold a Zoom call. A good mobile connection, in my experience, from what I've tested, a good percentage rating through the NPerf on Zoom, anything above like a 50 or 60%, in my opinion, is good, because most of my tests land at about 50 to 60%. A handful of times on like 5G ultra wideband, 5G plus, the 5G UC, those connections will get into like the 70s. But that's like the best you could do. Heck, even my fiber only gets like an 80% rating on Zoom. And then Wikipedia is not an issue. It loads up pretty quick for all of them. And I think it did on this one. But here's like the overall testing. And this is kind of how I want to circle back to things. All right. So for the downlink, peak 33 megabits per second. And then average was at 31. The uplink at 6 for a max. The average at 5.5. And then latency at 80 with an average of 94 milliseconds. The browsing performance rate came in just under 64%. Notice the color is orange, showing you that it's not green. If this was bad, it would have been red, probably like in the 50s or something. The streaming held up 90%, which is good, right? Most people doing video streaming on their phone anyways. But you could see how like a Zoom call would be a nightmare. And that's a problem I see with T-Mobile continuously throughout the city. All right, now if you look at the endpoint score, it came in at just over 60,000 points. That is a low score. I like to see this number 90,000, 100,000. I mean, heck, even like an 80,000 score, you'd say is an acceptable connection, depending on how bad the browsing or streaming might be and what you're actually doing. In this case, the browsing is low and the Zoom really brought down the score. Now, I don't know how many out there Zoom. I do. Oftentimes, I have to get on Zoom meetings for whatever reason, for work or, whatever group video chats we got to do. But I do use it, and it's a problem. It is really, really a struggle. But where this is going to circle back is pretty simple. The T-Mobile network, when you're on an upgraded tower site, is really, really good. There's a lot of capacity, especially if you're within about a mile of the site. Things are phenomenal. You're probably connecting to a large swath of spectrum. They've got tons of 1.9 gigahertz. They got tons of 2.5 gigahertz, right? They're N41, they're N71. They got lots of 5G going for them. They're upgrading radios and antennas on sites all the time. They're upgrading Sprint keep sites for a lot of people in a lot of places. Unfortunately for me, they haven't done this site. So this is what I'm seeing. If I was connecting to a newer site, that endpoint score would probably be around 110 or 120,000, especially if I'm within about a mile or so and I'm on the N41. But the worst thing about it, and I found this out, this is, internally, this is what's being talked about within the company, is new tower builds are going to be delayed until next year, right? So if you're tracking that, that means a lot of places which currently have either old Sprint sites that haven't been remodeled or upgraded, or you have coverage gaps and weakness in signal, you're not going to be seeing anything new, at least for another year. And it looks like they are prioritizing getting N41 upgrades completed on pre-existing sites that need it, right? So places that are congested. So that being the case, those new N41, radios and antennas that are going to get hung, they're going to be awesome. They're going to be able to actually use more bandwidth than what the current radios do today. So for example, if the maximum radio capacity for, like, say for example, the current radios is like 100 megahertz, they're going to put up, these new radios that they're going to install are going to be like 140, 180 megahertz, like whatever T-Mobile has there, they'll be able to utilize the entire amount of bandwidth they have. So I can't blame them for wanting to do that to address their capacity needs, because they can put up those high capacity radios, get all that bandwidth on air, right? And then really kick up the backhaul and boom, you've got tons of capacity. You probably got sites that could create 2 gigabits per second, if it's fully optimized, has good gear, good tuning, and they give it the backhaul. They could definitely do that. It's got to get a multi-gig circuit, obviously a fiber, but see how it's kind of like a gift and a curse. Some areas are getting great love. Some areas, like in this case, they're getting neglected, and I don't know when help is coming. From what I could tell, all I'm hearing is, maybe 2023, maybe, and who knows? Other things could happen. Maybe they have to buy more spectrum in some auction. Maybe they're forced to start deploying some millimeter wave, and it takes away from the spending. They have already talked about reducing capex. That doesn't bode well for situations like this. So here's a situation where the lack of infrastructure investment is hurting some places because they're prioritizing others. And this is not just a T-Mobile thing. This is a Verizon thing. This is an AT&T thing. Some places are getting more love than others. Some sites are getting prioritized and upgraded before others. This is just the pain, of not being included in these types of instances. But hopefully you guys learned something, and hopefully you guys, got to take this in, and maybe you can relate to it. Maybe this type of thing is happening around you, or maybe you're in an area where the upgrades are phenomenal and they're extensive and you're loving the performance. But you could see this site does not have 5G. It doesn't have N71, N41, nothing new or modern. I mean, heck, this site used to have band 41, right? The old Sprint LTE band 41. It had 40 megahertz of it. It used to get me 200 megabits per second. Now I'm reduced to 10 megahertz of band 25. The only other LTE connection on here is band 26, the 800 megahertz, and it's like 3 megahertz of it. It's so slow. You'd be lucky to hold a call on it. By the way, this site I drop calls on, constantly get buffering. Uh, you know, audio calls don't work. FaceTime doesn't work. It's a nightmare. So, like, whenever I'm in and around the site, I just don't use T-Mobile. It's just a nightmare till I get to another site. Then it's good. Right. So this is what I'm living. Thought I'd share it with you guys. Sound off in the comment section below. You are the voice of the people, the SMT Nation. Let your voice be heard. If you enjoyed this video, you let me know by liking this and then sharing it. And then go ahead and subscribe for more and turn on that bell notifications icon to never miss an upload. Links for my Twitter and my Patreon page are in the description. With Patreon, you could support us and get early access to content and exclusive videos not found anywhere else. And for all business inquiries, they can go to the Gmail address in the description box. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Peace.